Hi, everyone. This is Brad Kramer, one of the facilitators for today. I just wanted to let you know that the audio line is open. You are all currently on mute, and I'm actually going to mute from our side as we give a few more moments for everyone to finish joining. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fourth National Program Integrity webinar hosted by the National Center on Subsidy, Innovation, and Accountability. Before we get started, we're going to go through some quick call logistics. We do hope that this is an interactive session and are planning for multiple breaks with time for questions and answers as well as open discussion. If you used your phone to call in, we just want to remind you that you do need to enter your PIN number in order to unmute your line and be heard on this afternoon's call. And your audio PIN number is in the audio panel of GoToWebinar dashboard, and that audio PIN number is unique to you. If you would like to ask any questions or have comments, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you, or you can type your questions and comments into the questions panel. If anyone is having PowerPoint, GoToWebinar, registration issues, any sort of IT issue, please reach out to Katie Watts. Her email is shown there on the screen, kwatts@wrma.com. I also want to share that the recording of this webinar will be available a few days, probably early next week. And for introductions this afternoon, the handsome gentleman on the left is Brad Kramer. He is the technical manager at the National Center on Subsidy, Innovation, and Accountability. And on the right, that's me, Leanne Bryan, Technical Assistance Lead and Region 1 TA Liaison for the Subsidy Center. And now with a welcome message from the Office of Child Care, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Wheatley, Deputy Director of the Office of Child Care.
Thank you so much. I'm excited about the unveiling of the tool, and I can't imagine a better day for this because of the headlines that are just beginning to break. There is a state, and I won't say which one, that narrows it down, of course, to 50, where the headlines today are that they have millions and millions of dollars in fraudulent CCDF spending, that it is possible it could be up to half of the CCDF spending this year. It is a complex and devious system that got put together with multiple people involved and has been so very successful that other devious people in other states can't wait to try it. So I believe that every state needs to know about the tool, needs to be ready to put it to work, and needs to be ready to put everything that's possible into work to prevent fraud from ever happening and to identify it very quickly if it does. So I will leave you in the good hands of Brad and Leanne to learn all about this tool and about the self-assessment. So thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. And Leanne, I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you, Ellen. I guess today's webinar is great timing, especially related to our fraud risk assessment tool. So for those of you that participated in our webinar series last summer, you may recall us talking about the fraud toolkit and updating the self-assessment instrument. So drum roll. Today we're going to demo both of those tools for you. They are ready. So our first agenda item is to talk through a new fraud toolkit that's in development at the Subsidy Center, as well as a demo by Brad of the new fraud risk assessment tool. Then I'll remind everyone, or maybe if you're a little bit newer, you'll learn for the first time about the Grantee Internal Controls Self-Assessment Instrument. This instrument has been around for about 11 years, but we recently updated it to include the new CCDF regulations. I do encourage everyone now, if possible, to go ahead and download that instrument as well as the addendum from the files pod so that you can have it ready to review after the fraud risk assessment tool demo. Finally, we'll open it up to discussion among our participants, allow for questions and answers, or maybe just some sharing of state fraud prevention strategies. So today's webinar is going to be a little bit less formal than some of our previous ones, or at least that's the plan. We certainly know how busy everyone is right now, and the term busy may be an understatement for some of you. And while we certainly want to share helpful, useful information for all of you, we also wanted to give you all an opportunity to share with one another and to ask some questions around program integrity or fraud prevention. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brad to demo the fraud assessment tool.
Thank you, Leanne, for the introduction, and thank you, Ellen, for the timely, albeit shocking, realization of how severe this problem can be. But I agree, this is a great time for us to be debuting this first piece of the fraud toolkit. And the reason I say a first piece, the fraud toolkit is something that is in development now, and it's going to be used to assist lead agencies in increasing program integrity and accountability and giving tools to help decrease potential fraud within the program. This assessment tool is just the first piece of more to come, and the tool that I'm going to show you today is really just a prototype. This will be the first step of many, and hopefully it will allow you to do exactly what it says, complete a self-assessment to see just where are your risk vulnerabilities for fraud. And we have a couple different topic areas that will be included in the overall toolkit once it's finalized. Assessment, which is the piece we're talking about today. There will also be modules on detection, prevention, enforcement, and monitoring. So without further ado, I am going to talk a little bit about the risk assessment tool, and then I'm going to show you how that works, and you can see for yourself how we assess areas such as systems and software, staff training, provider training, management and communication, collections, and procedures for suspected fraud. Those are some of the topic areas that the risk assessment tool is going to touch on. And then eventually, the greater fraud toolkit, once published, will drill down deeper into many of these topics. And the assessment tool will show you where you might want to focus your attention first. So, without further ado, I'm going to share the tool. Right now, this prototype is in a Microsoft Excel workbook. Eventually, the fraud toolkit we anticipate is going to be a collection of web pages that are all going to be accessible online, and you'll be able to work through them as a web page as opposed to having to deal with a file such as this Excel workbook. But hopefully this as a prototype will generate some feedback as far as functionality and topic and things of that nature that we can use to inform the development of the more robust tools that will eventually compile the entire fraud toolkit. So what we have here is a list of 20 fraud-related questions, and these are hoping to identify strengths and areas that could use improvement with regards to topics that are often related to potential fraud. And so as part of the handouts on the file tab of your GoToMeeting dashboard, there's also a user guide that will walk you through how to use this tool. And we will also be available to send this out to you upon request probably next week. And you may want to reach out to your regional office if you have any additional follow-up questions or trouble accessing the file once we send it. So without further ado, I'm going to begin answering some of these questions from the fraud risk assessment tool. And this is pretty simple in how it works. We've got a question, and these questions are all yes, no, and you may also not be sure, so we've allowed that to be an answer as well. And so if I'm a lead agency and I'm trying to look to see where I might want to focus some attention, I'll open this tool up and I'll start answering the questions to the best of my ability. First one we have here is a systems and software related question. Does your agency have security rules in place to limit data access to only those who need it? For example, provider data, financial data, client data, etc. Well, I can either type in yes, no, or I don't know, or I can click this drop-down arrow, and that'll give me my valid choices. And if I know that we do that in my agency, I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to be given a risk level based on my response. Since we do that, the risk is lower than normally would be. And then there's some automated text that shows up here. Super. That's having user-specific security rules helps protect against program data and can prevent unauthorized access to folks that shouldn't be able to see such things. So I feel pretty good about that. I got a low risk. I've got a green answer. Let's move on to the next question. Does your eligibility or provider system have controls in place that would enforce adherence to policy. For example, alerts, management reports, system edits that prevent a worker from proceeding if there's missing information. For the sake of demonstration, I'm going to say that no, we do not have that in place. Well, that's a pretty high-risk area. If you don't have something like that in place, obviously you could have folks doing things in the system that they shouldn't be allowed to based on policy. And so some recommendation text shows up there that simply says system restrictions are a critical way to prevent intentional or unintentional errors. Consider technical assistance to help identify best practices in this area. And I apologize, I'm going to shrink my screen down a little bit, so hopefully you can see the entire row there. I'm not going to read all 20 of these questions and take up the entire hour when I know that you're perfectly capable of doing it. But I'm going to go through here now, and I'm going to just put in some yes, no, and I don't knows. And then I'm going to move you over to the results summary tab. As you'll see down here at the bottom, there's another page to this workbook. So I'm just going to answer a few of these. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to answer these pretty quickly. So when you see that risk level of not assigned, if you don't know the answer to a question, then we're not assigning a risk level, but we do recommend that you research and find out. For example, here I have said, I don't know, next to the question, does your agency have cross-program communication protocols for sharing high-risk activities, for example, licensing and subsidy, USDA and licensing, food programs, et cetera? If you don't know the response, we can't really give a risk assignment, so we exclude that from the overall summary that we're going to look at in just a moment. Okay, I've exhausted all of the questions. I've gotten a risk level assigned for each one, and I have some recommendation language that we've provided based on experience and best practices and things of that nature. So now what do I do? Well, I'm going to click this results summary tab, and you'll see that in a very quick snapshot, my overall risk level here on the center of the screen, I have 7 responses that resulted in a high risk. 4 were medium, 5 were low, and there's a chart here to support that as well. And then there were 4 that aren't counted. And considering the variables that have been assigned to each one of these, I've been presented with an overall risk score of 62 out of 100, and that puts me as an overall high risk. Now, if I go back here and I answer a couple of these questions that I didn't know the answer to, and I come back and look at my summary again, now things don't look quite so bad. At least I have a little bit better of a picture where my higher risk areas are. And that's where I would recommend focusing your attention first. If you want a little bit more detail, instead of just an overall, I've got a 7 high risk and 4 medium and 8 low, on the right-hand side of the page, you can see some category-based risk summaries. So those question groupings, for example, the system and software category, I've got 1 high risk response there and 3 low and 1 that was not assigned. For staff training, it looks like I should probably focus some time there because I've got 3 high-risk items in that category. I've also got 3 down here in procedures for suspected fraud. So those were some questions that were related to that. This is just one way to look at where you may want to start focusing as part of your assessment for what kind of fraud strategy you want to put together. Another thing you can do, I'm going to come back over to the questions tab. If I scroll all the way up to the top, I can do some filtering and sorting based on my responses. These little drop-down arrows on the top row are auto filters. If you're familiar with Excel, this will be second nature to you. I can come to this risk column, click the drop-down arrow, and if I uncheck everything and just select high, I can immediately see all of the questions and categories where my risk has been determined to be higher than usual. So I could quickly scroll through this list and review what the question is. For example, do you have a fraud tip hotline? No, I do not. That seems like a pretty high risk area, and we suggest or we comment that it's a best practice to have a single phone number to report suspected fraudulent activity. We recommend considering to establish a centralized approach for the community to report suspected fraudulent activity. And if you take some of these suggested actions or you seek technical assistance to help remedy some of these problems, you could always come back and take this assessment again and see if you've improved your score any. And that's quite simple to do. I'm going to come through the risk filter again. I'm going to select all, and that's going to show me all of the responses. And I can just scroll up and down, and I can highlight all of these, and I can just delete all of my responses. You'll notice the results summary all resets back to 0, and I can start over again. So that was a very quick overview of how this tool works. We tried, when putting it together, to be broad in the areas where we thought a lot of vulnerabilities were, and spoke to a lot of folks who had experience with fraudulent responsibilities in the past, or fraudulent prevention or detection and so forth. And so hopefully, as a first step, this will help get you looking into where do you have strengths, where do you have weaknesses, and at the same time, if you take the opportunity to run through this and you have feedback, we are perfectly happy to hear that feedback and use it, as I said earlier, to sort of inform our abilities and activities as we move forward, developing the broader fraud toolkit overall. I'm going to pause now and open it up to the audience. If there are any questions, as Leanne said, please raise your hand. There's a little control there for you to do so, and we'll unmute your phone. And you also have the option to use the questions panel to submit your questions. Okay, I see we do have a question from Sarah Hall. Thank you, Sarah. She said that this is a great tool, and she's asking where we can get a copy of it. We will be sending a copy of this out to everyone who participated today. We'll send that out next week. And then if you know other coworkers or folks in other regions or other folks in your region who may benefit from this but were not able to join today, they are perfectly welcome to reach out to their regional office or their TA liaison, and we'll get a copy to them as well. And reminder that there is a user guide available for download directly from the webinar. For technical reasons, we were not able to upload the actual tool itself for download.
I'm not seeing any other questions.
This is Katie. I think there was a raised hand, but I might have accidentally lowered it. So if you had your hand raised and you still have a question, please raise it again. I'm sorry, I think I accidentally lowered all the hands. All right, well, maybe they did it. Maybe it wasn't me. So, okay.
Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
Before we move on to our next topic, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in, any additional questions coming in right now. We're going to move on to the grantee assessment instrument. But before we do that, I just wanted to double check to see if Ellen and or Shelley had any follow-up or feedback they wanted to provide on the tool demo. I know, Shelley, you've seen it a couple times already. Oh, I actually just see, I do see a hand coming up. Richard Bartlett. I have unmuted your line. Go ahead and ask the question. And make sure you unmute your phone if you have your phone muted manually.
Maybe Richard was just doing some exercises this afternoon with his hand raising.
Maybe. It looks like he's muted again.
Richard, you can always type any questions into the question panel. All right, I think we can move over to the self-assessment instrument. So I am going to go ahead and make myself a presenter. Give me a second here. So hopefully you can now all see our transition slide for the Grantee Internal Control Self-Assessment Instrument. So I mentioned previously that this instrument has been around for quite some time, but with the help of the Office of Child Care, the Subsidy Center recently updated the instrument, and it was published to the CCTAN website, or the Child Care Technical Assistance Network site, back in January. So a little bit of background on this instrument before we dive in. The original self-assessment instrument was developed and piloted with about 10 states back in 2007. As a result of those pilot visits, of course, the tool was modified and updated, and self-assessment site visits continued through about 2015. With a little something called reauthorization, there were lots of programs and policy changes going on at lead agencies. So these specific CCDF site visits were sort of put on hold, but there were a few states that participated in some modified versions of a self-assessment site visit just over the past couple years. As recently as last month, though, the OCC and Subsidy Center participated in a self-assessment site visit, and we do hope to continue these types of visits either on-site or virtually in the upcoming months. So what is this instrument all about, and how can it help your program? The purpose of the self-assessment instrument is to help our CCDF grantees improve their performance. So it provides an effective mechanism for grantees to evaluate their organization's internal controls and identify and address any areas of weakness or risk. So if we talk through the benefits of the instrument, most of you on this webinar are probably involved in some way with the writing of the CCDF plan. So the plan has an entire section, Section 8, on ensuring grantee program integrity and accountability. The self-assessment instrument provides a framework for reviewing how well your state's policies and procedures meet the CCDF regulatory requirements in the areas of program integrity and financial accountability. So by having these facilitated discussions as a team, talking through operations, internal controls, and a variety of activities within the CCDF program, that can help grantees gain a clearer understanding of their policy and procedure, and can also aid in identifying areas that may need improvement. In taking this deeper dive into state processes, the team may identify an area of concern or an area of policy or procedure that just may need to be strengthened a little bit. On the flip side of that, it can also identify your state's best practices, and then in turn, those can be shared nationally within and across our OCC regions. The instrument can also be used to monitor progress toward reducing errors and the improper payments. So as part of this assessment site visit, we would likely review error rate methodology and maybe take a look at some recently reviewed child care cases. And of course, if we are able to help in reducing improper payments, that can lead to serving more eligible CCDF families, or maybe diverting some resources, some staff, to other areas of the program, areas that the grantee may want to beef up a little bit. How is the self-assessment instrument used? So I won't lie, it is a fairly large document, 30 pages to be exact, and that's before the state adds their responses. So it can certainly sound a little daunting, but by having these facilitated conversations and essentially a checklist to cover different aspects of your program, it makes it a pretty useful tool. Grantees may wish to go through and complete some of the sections of the instrument prior to the visit, but while on site, the Subsidy Center will assist in documenting results and in completion of the instrument. As far as the site visit itself, to get through this tool in its entirety, that's generally going to take between 2 and 3 full days of on-site. And that would include the lead agency staff, OCC central office staff, regional office staff, and staff from the Subsidy Center. The instrument can also be used virtually, so perhaps via a GoToMeeting, and we would allot about 2 or 3 hours of time for each section of the instrument. And I will get to those sections on the next slide. So all in all, the instrument serves as a guide for group conversation and walking through some various elements to help identify risks and gaps within your program. Another benefit of this facilitated discussion is the ability to identify any needed technical assistance, maybe addressing some concerns right away, and hearing about best practices that may be shared by the Office of Child Care, the Subsidy Center, or any other national center staff that might be along for the visit. Now we're going to talk through what has changed in this instrument. So some of you may have utilized this instrument in the past or are at least familiar with it. So the biggest change is the regulations. We pulled all of the regulations and the administrative guidance into a separate addendum. So basically, when we started working on this tool and updating it with all the new regs, the instrument became pretty large. I fondly described it as the beast. And so we made a decision to move the regulations out of the tool itself, but to still have them available as a reference in the addendum. The instrument does still contain the same 5 sections that address CCDF core business functions. The first section is eligibility, determination, and review. And this section actually has 3 subsections: family eligibility and payments, provider eligibility, and monitoring controls. The second section is the improper payment case review process. The third is fraud and overpayment, prevention, detection, and recovery, federal reporting, and the 5th section is audits and monitoring. So just want to point out that the team, the grantee team, does not have to take a deep dive into every area, but using the instrument as a guide, that's a way to ensure that at least every area of the program is touched on. All right, now we are going to just take a quick peek at the self-assessment instrument. Let me pull it up here. So here you can see the cover page for the self-assessment instrument. Essentially, all you need to do here is type in your grantee's name and the date of the visit. If we go to the second page, that's where you can capture everyone who participated in the assessment. And then the actual assessment tool begins on page 3. This page provides an explanation on how the tool is used. And I'm going to go ahead and skip down to the next section because I'll talk about this as I show you the tool. So the first section is eligibility, determination, and review. And each of the sections starts with a bit of this information about what the team is assessing, as well as references and documents for completing the section. Now I'm going to take it down to the next page. This is section 1A, family eligibility and payments. So in the first column, you can see the specific program elements. So here it's that the grantee ensures that only eligible families and children receive services. And then there's grantee considerations that can be used when reviewing the program, and the degree maybe to which the internal control is effective. So these considerations that we've identified are examples of best practice and can help to provide some context for evaluating each of the elements. Over in the second column, that's where the results of the evaluation are recorded. The findings box, of course, can be used for comments that document strengths, weaknesses, or any areas of concern. Users will identify action steps for addressing any of those findings in the mitigation and action step box. And then as a team, a priority level for completing any action steps can be assigned. So here you can see 2 has already been assigned medium, but I can change that, or maybe we've had additional discussions and we've decided as a team to make the priority level high. So each section is set up the same way, and teams can really dig as deep as they want and spend several hours on a particular section, or maybe they just want to skim the surface and touch on a particular section. And again, you all have this self-assessment instrument for download, so you can feel free to skim through it at your leisure. I'm not going to go through all the sections, but I am going to switch over, to the addendum. This, as I said, is the addendum to the self-assessment instrument, and it was created to support a grantee's completion of the self-assessment instrument. So for some of the sections of the instrument, there is applicable CCDF regulation or administrative guidance. Sorry about that. I just discovered there is a bit of delay for you all. But again, this is the addendum to the self-assessment instrument. Not all of the sections have regulatory guidance right here in the addendum. And to give you an example of that, the majority of guidance out there around the improper payment case review process, which I believe is section 2, that can be found in the data collection instructions, or DCI. So we don't certainly have the whole DCI here in the addendum, but the DCI is referenced at the start of section 2. Again, both of these instruments and the fraud assessment tool instructions are available for download. And certainly if you're interested in an internal control self-assessment site visit and taking a deeper dive into your state's policy, procedure, program integrity, please reach out to your regional office. If you're super excited, you can raise your hand right now and let everybody know that you would love to have a visit. I'm guessing there aren't too many hands raised. So let's get us back to the PowerPoint and see if there's any questions related to the self-assessment instrument, or if anyone's had a chance to look a little bit. Oh no, I guess never mind. My apologies. The self-assessment tool is not available for download quite yet. All right, it doesn't look like there's any questions out there or any hands raised right now. So for the last 10 or 15 minutes, we're just going to open it up to discussion. And one of the first things we wanted to ask about, we know that there are quite a few states on the line right now that have participated in a self-assessment site visit in the past. And we were just wondering if you were willing to share your experiences with that site visit or any outcomes that you would like to share with the rest of the attendees. So if you're available or willing to share, if you could please raise your hand or go ahead and jump in with anything you'd like to share. So hopefully I can try to spur some conversation here. We know that Michigan has participated in a self-assessment site visit, New Jersey, Louisiana, Kentucky, Mississippi. I wonder if any of you would like to share, or maybe Mary Beth would like to share. California? I haven't looked closely at the attendee list, so I'm not exactly sure who all we have on, but I'm going to take a look here now.
Bueller.
Quite a bunch today, huh?
Maybe we should hand out candy. Oh, that only works in person.
Yeah. Shelley, I wonder if you may want to share, or is Jim Bates on the line this afternoon? No, Jim? right, well, maybe we'll try to move on to another topic, but real quick before we leave the self-assessment instrument, just a reminder that this is a voluntary, process. It's totally up to your state to participate in. It's certainly not an I gotcha from the Office of Child Care, the Subsidy Center, or any other TA center for that matter. It's simply an opportunity to improve your processes and reduce your fraud and increase program integrity, as well as just provide that oversight. So I guess also as a question to everybody, are there folks who would like to share any of their internal fraud prevention strategies? Maybe your fraud unit is in-house, right, alongside or right down the hall from your eligibility workers. Would you like to share any of your experiences or strategies related to fraud prevention? Jim Bates, I see you have a comment. Prevention is all about communication. Thanks for joining, Jim. Jim hasn't called in, though. So if we take just a second to talk about communication, of course, that's communication between your subsidy, your licensing, your subsidy and your fraud investigation unit, licensing and fraud investigation unit. It's communication with parents, providers, communication all across the board. Jenna from Louisiana, you are on your mobile phone and can't figure out how to talk. Jenna, I know you have a strong fraud prevention program down there in Louisiana. Let me see, can we send Jenna her PIN number?
I just did, Leanne. I don't know if it worked.
It did. Welcome and thank you. You want to go ahead and share?
You should be able to unmute yourself, Jenna.
If Mary Beth Jackson's on the phone, I wonder if you would like to speak about your experience with the self-assessment instrument as a previous state administrator or as a representative of the Subsidy Center. Mary Beth, I've unmuted you. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yes, I'm happy to share. Back in probably 2010, I was 1 year into the position of state administrator in Kentucky, and we had a very high error rate, and we had a site visit from the regional office and central office and the subsidy center. And it was, first off, I can't say enough good things about it as a new state administrator, because being in the position only a year, I'm sure everyone on this call knows all of the components of CCDF. It's virtually impossible to learn every little thing about it. This 3-day visit gave me the opportunity to have staff in the room with the subsidy center and the regional office and central office and go through components of the subsidy program and actually get the questions answered. So I felt like, by the end of that visit, I definitely had a much better handle on all the components of our subsidy program and where we had weaknesses and what we needed to do to improve our error rate. And also the other very fortunate thing that resulted from that is we had some internal state challenges on accessing data for eligibility in terms of verification. Just things like maybe getting access to other systems in our agency, for example, TANF eligibility or SNAP eligibility, just for verification purposes. And there was a lot of questions that people, leadership above me were concerned about sharing that data. And just having the federal folks in the room with those leadership positions really helped kind of clarify that the sharing of that data was absolutely permissible. And as a result of that visit and the federal folks being in the room, we were able to access a lot of different data systems that we hadn't been able to do in the past. So there were a number of wins that came from the visit, but I can't speak enough about how it really gave me a better handle on all things subsidy as a new state administrator. Now that was years ago, but it was the same instrument and it was very successful visit.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth.
No problem.
Now that Mary Beth has broken the ice for us, does anyone else want to share their experiences with the self-assessment instrument?
It looks like Jenna Broadway has her hand up, so
Ooh, Jenna's back.
let's, she's unmuted. You're unmuted on our end, Jenna. So
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
Can you hear me? Awesome. Hi, how's everybody? I've been
Doing
trying to
good.
get through on this phone. There we go. So, Leanne, you asked earlier about eligibility and fraud. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Louisiana, but I'll go to the assessment tool first. As you guys know, our fraud department is fairly new, maybe about 2 or 3 years old. And the assessment tool was the older tool was the tool that we initially utilized and use it as a reference to actually build a unit. So the tool is actually a very, very good tool and a very useful tool for me that I utilized then. And I continue to utilize just to do a self-check to find out where we are and where we need to be. So I really absolutely love the tool. And one of the things that we have by our program, the entire CCDF program being in one building, we have the eligibility on one floor and the actual fraud unit on another floor. And there's a lot of in-house training that allows the two groups to kind of communicate with different stages, because our systems are not linked together like we need them to be just yet. By having us all in the same building, it helps us out with communication as far as fraud and prevention is concerned. So I just thought I'd share that. Can you guys hear me?
So much, Jenna. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'm so
Thank
happy to
you.
hear that the self-assessment instrument has been used internally and helps
Yes.
to guide.
Yes, it was a great guide.
Don Beltram is also on the line today. He's a subject matter expert with the National Center on Subsidy Innovation and Accountability, and he has also participated in some of these site visits. And he just wanted to note that one of the greatest benefits that we've heard from states is having the opportunity to meet with staff from other divisions and agencies and to establish and build relationships and to keep that communication ongoing after the site visit. So thank you for that, Dawn. So I see a question here from Michelle. Is the guide geared towards the recipient side of fraud or the provider side of fraud? There is a provider section as well as a family eligibility section. So it's going to touch on both sides. And Michelle, please feel free to download the self-assessment instrument, and then you can see all of the different elements and considerations for the sections. If you want to dig a little deeper into provider or family eligibility, you can definitely do that within the instrument. We only have about, you're welcome, Michelle. We only have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone else feel the desire to share some of their best practices or strategies, or maybe you have some questions for some other states that you just want to bounce an idea off of? Now's a good opportunity to maybe ask your questions of another state. Since we are on the topic of program integrity, I was looking at the CCDF draft preprint, and I did notice that there are 2 questions that are a little bit newer with this plan preprint, 8.1.2 and 8.1.3. Again, that's in the draft preprint. So just wanted to draw your attention to that, and if there was, maybe you're working on drafting your preprint, if there were any questions that you might have had related to integrity and the use of funds through sound fiscal management, that's a new question coming up. And then there's also a question relating to describing processes to identify risk. Now, it's a similar question in previous plan years, but it's worded a little different. Just wanted to throw that out there as a heads up. And again, if there's anything you want to ask of your peers, now's a good opportunity to do that. Eric, thanks so much. I see you have posed a comment. Are you able to unmute your line, Eric? Is Eric unmuted?
Leanne, I'm going to try to unmute him.
Yeah, I don't know if the system's set up for
You're on.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where the microphone is in this. I don't know if anyone can hear me at all.
I'll go ahead and respond or read Eric's comment here. So Eric Poe says, establishing good relationships with our food program representatives has helped the state a lot with provider fraud. By sharing and comparing subsidy attendance records versus meal claims, we can help each other detect fraud within each other's programs. We can also flag our colleagues in child care licensing with any concerns about providers operating over capacity. So definitely, those are great fraud prevention strategies. Thank you, Eric. All right, well, it's 3:59. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I just wanted to let everybody know on behalf of OCC, thank you for attending. OCC Central Office, their phone lines actually went out, so we lost them on audio. But if anyone has areas of program integrity and fraud prevention that you want to learn more about in the next webinar, scheduled for August 2nd, please let us know. Or if you would like to present your state's program integrity strategies, you can reach out to me. My contact info is there. You can reach out to the regional office or your regional TA liaison. And here I'm going to leave you with our subsidy centers, regional map, and TA liaison contacts. Again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We will make sure that all of the resources and the recording are available to everybody in the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you.